Hi guys, today we are going to talk about the best digital streamer that Volumio has ever produced, best sounding at least, and it's Rivo Plus. Now you probably remember, if you're regular here, that I reviewed the original Rivo some time ago. I still have it here with me, we'll make a direct comparison. But let's start with some basics first. So as you can see, Rivo Plus looks basically exactly the same. The chassis, the design, everything is the same. And I really liked the styling of the original Rivo, so I like that. And the only thing that changed style-wise are colors on the front panel. And I actually like these dark green, blue colors even more than what was on the original Rivo. But styling aside, there are bigger differences here to talk about. First of all, in the back, you can see that among all of other digital inputs and outputs, we now have I²S, which is really important for modern DACs, especially high quality ones, because I²S is quickly becoming preferred digital connection between streaming platform and your DAC. But aside I²S, if you look at the back panel, you can see that there are still USB, coaxial, AES, EBU. There's of course an Ethernet port, so you can connect it to network. And one of these USBs can also be used for an external storage. One important thing to notice here is that the unit is powered by 5 volts 3 amperes DC power supply, meaning that the power supply is external. But we'll talk about it and how it can influence the sound a bit later in the video. Now, talking about the hardware inside of Rivo Plus, if you just look at the spec sheet and you can see the CPU, a memory and things like that, I think basically everything is same or almost the same as for previous Rivo, but one big important difference is that the output stage and the filtering and processing of digital signal that is fed to your DAC is different, and Volumio this time utilized the same new and improved circuitry they used for their Motivo streamer. And I think they just listened to what audience asked, because many wanted that elevated sound fidelity out of their digital outputs, but without extra options of Motivo. And Rivo Plus is basically that. No DAC section, no headphone amplifier, no big display, and as you can see, front panel is simple. There is one button only. You can turn the unit on, turn it off, and there is a LED that can signalize that it's on, off, or in a standby mode. Now, just a very short talk about software and the operating system running on this device. It's a probably well-known Volumio operating system. It's an audiophile system that you can also use on other devices that are not made by Volumio, especially Raspberry Pi based streamers. But there is a free version that has some functions stripped down. Then there is a premium version that can do much more things. And premium version is paid software. But if you buy Volumio device like Rivo Plus or any other Volumio hardware, that premium version software comes preloaded. You don't have to pay extra for it, and you just have it here. And I will not go into details about how Volumio OS functions, because that would take a whole video or maybe even more. But the important thing to know is there is an app available for your phone. You can download it. It will find the streamer on your home network. And from the app, you control everything you need about device, including settings, but also there is a rich user interface. And you can use several different ways to connect to this streamer. You can use Tidal Connect or Spotify Connect or UPnP Connect, Rune Ready, so Rune protocol if you're a Rune user. There is also native support for some services, for example Tidal and Qobuz that I'm personally using. Both of these can be logged in directly from the Volumio UI, and you can browse your libraries, playlists, favorite tracks, artists, etc. You can also make a queue from different sources, like some songs from Tidal, some from Qobuz, some from your local network storage, and everything works just fine. One important thing to notice here is that this time Volumio works really well and reliable on Rivo Plus. It's something worth mentioning because when Motivo was launched a few months ago, I noticed that some bugs and glitches were still present after the release of the device. And that has been corrected with several updates in coming months, and Motivo is now working quite reliable in my experience. But Rivo Plus works flawlessly out of the box, at least in my experience. And one last bit of information, but an important one. Rivo Plus took a price hike from 9.89 of the original to 12.99 euros for Rivo Plus. But as you will see in the sound, I think that price hike is justified. Also, an important thing to mention here is that this pricing includes worldwide shipping and all taxes and expenses, so that is the only and the final price that you will pay for this device. Because that's usually not how it works. Most other brands that sell directly to customers, they just list the bare price and then shipping is yours, taxes are yours, and that can pile up considerably. So just have that in mind if you try to align the prices with other products. And with that said, let's talk about the sound. I started testing Rivo Plus with its factory-supplied small switching power supply, and that's this one. And with that one, it already sounds really great. Now, just to get that out of the way, tonality is fantastic. It's perfectly neutral. There is no bias towards bassiness and warmth or high-frequency sharpness or being analytical overly, nothing like that. If you remember my original Rivo review, it was one of the more mature-sounding streamers. And the same goes for Rivo Plus. It's just very neutrally well-balanced sounding streamer, with a great amount of details, with really good soundstage. It has very commendable width and just size and airiness. Instruments are well separated. It feels like there is plenty of space and empty room between different tones. And when I have a device like this on my hands, that I cannot really detect tonal biases or easily noticeable shortcomings, it's quite difficult to talk about the sound in isolation. It simply sounds really good. For example, if you're coming from just connecting your DAC directly to your PC or a laptop, this would be a huge upgrade. With clearly more information retrieval from the recording, and the sound that is at the same time cleaner but fuller, and in some crowded music passage where things would get tiring and tense with laptop, they would be much more composed and calmer with this streamer. So I think that's some base level that we need to put here, that if you are a dedicated audiophile, a dedicated digital platform, digital streamer like this will noticeably outperform just general purpose PC. And we're not even talking about that much on this channel. If you don't believe something like that, then you still have some experience to gain before you can come back and talk with this community about these kind of things. But what happens if we compare Rivo Plus to a serious sounding streamer like its predecessor Rivo, that is a great sounding streamer on its own? Well, as I said, all of the basic tonal qualities are there. Rivo Plus does not change the nature of the original Rivo, but it does improve on it in a way that soundstage feels even wider and airier. Separation of tones and instruments and vocals is even better. It feels like each tone has a bit more space to breathe and be more clearly defined in the mix compared to the original Rivo. And that also goes for inner tone texturing that is more pronounced, it's better. For example, one of my favorite instruments, double bass, that sounds both weighty but also has those textures and harmonic richness of vibrating strings. That sounds clean and precise with Rivo, but with Rivo Plus it's even snappier with crisper transients and more of those inner tone harmonics and vibrations and just those tiny details that make strings sound like strings. That's just something that Rivo Plus is doing better, and it does sound better and improved compared to the original Rivo. And only when you compare Rivo Plus to a Motivo, you notice that they resolve those transients and tiny details and inner tone textures in the same way, on the same high level. But Rivo Plus is more affordable, and of course it doesn't include a DAC and the headphone output and the touchscreen. If you need all of that, Motivo is a great choice, but if you don't, if you only need great digital platform with great sounding digital outputs, then Rivo Plus is a great choice at a lower price. If anything, and now I'm splitting hairs, if anything, Rivo Plus sounds ever so slightly better. Not in a way that it reveals more or has wider soundstage or anything like that, all of that is the same, but Rivo Plus does have just a touch more boldness in the bass and upper bass section, which makes the whole sound just a touch bolder on Rivo Plus, and just a touch more light-footed on Motivo. But that difference is so small that I think it's not even worth talking about. Now, if you're wondering, well, how Rivo Plus compares to Eversolo DMP A6 or DMP A8, I will not make these comparisons in their full because I already did that for Volumio Motivo, so you can just go back and watch that video. But long story short, if you don't want to watch all of that, Motivo was better than both Eversolo A6 and even than A8. It sounded wider, bigger, more revealing, greater transient response. And given that Rivo Plus and Motivo sound the same, all of what I said for Motivo still stands true for Rivo Plus. It also sounds better than Eversolo A8's digital outputs with more richness, more detail retrieval, quicker, more incisive transients, and just bigger, airier, richer sound. So from all streamers that I've tested on this channel, Rivo Plus and Motivo are two best sounding streamers so far. But Rivo Plus has one advantage compared to Motivo, and that is that it uses 5 volts 3 amperes switching power supply. Motivo used 9 volts 4 amperes, which is the amperage that is more difficult to find and acquire, and it's also more expensive because 4 amperes is a bit higher, 9 volts is also higher, but it was needed to power that headphone amplifier, that DAC and display. And Rivo Plus doesn't have any of that. So 5 volts, 3 amperes, it's all it needs. And you can try experimenting with different higher quality power supplies and see what you get. But today I wanted to mention Volumio's own Lineo5 power supply. It's a big, chunky, beastly thing, really, for a linear power supply with just one output. And Lineo5 costs 350 euros, but if you bundle it together with Rivo Plus, you get discount 100 euros, which makes for a total of 550 euros for both a linear power supply Lineo5 and Rivo Plus. And I'll just say it immediately, if you are thinking about Rivo Plus, I strongly recommend that you buy this bundle together. Because once Lineo5 was added to Rivo Plus, it brought smile to my face immediately. Now, it's not about getting some extraordinary amount of details, extra details or something like that, but the calmness and the smoothness of the sound, just the liquidity of tones increased, and also very important, bass line and the mid-bass mass increased significantly. And this change is not only observable in the deep bass lines, but it influences the whole sound, the mid-range too. For example, vocals or acoustic instruments with chamber sound more chesty, more full-bodied. And because of that, those instruments and vocals, when they appear in front of you, in between your speakers, they feel more three-dimensional, more palpable and believable in space. And just a short story from the olden days when I have just started this YouTube channel and I only had some very affordable DACs, and it was my first time that I personally in my system tried a multi-bit DAC. And it was a shit Modi multi-bit, and I compared it to some older topping, I believe it was E30, and I remember that while like overall amount of details, like tiny details happening, did not significantly change coming from topping to shit Modi multi-bit, how actually tonality got bolder and tones became more three-dimensional and just more juicy, full-bodied, palpable in space. And that was the moment when I became a big fan of multi-bit DACs being on chip, like Shit is doing, or R2R designs like many other manufacturers are doing. They bring that acoustic mass that is just so seductive and sounds so realistic. And adding Lineo5 to Rivo Plus does the same. Now, I listened with it for some 2 days, and then I decided to go back to a factory switching power supply. And while details and soundstage width and many things are still there, that palpability decreases and tones are just not as full-bodied and as realistic and as believable anymore. And on top of that, highs become less smooth, less liquid-like and ringy in time, but they get more of that what you would perceive as digital. At least people call that digital sounding, but I don't think it has anything with digital. It's just some dirt and noise from lesser power supplies that exhibit itself in that white noisy kind of way that makes, especially highs, because they are weak and tiny sounds and frequencies, it makes them more dirty and just noisy. And with something like a good linear power supply that's nicely cleaned up and smoothed out and made, some people call that coherent in time, but I like a phrase, liquidy smooth. And now when these two are combined, this is by far my favorite digital platform and streaming setup that I've tried so far. I love it. It's one of these things that for days I just kept playing new songs so I could hear this newfound weightiness and realistic body and smoothness to tones. So Rivo Plus, great stuff. Software works well out of the box. Sound is fantastic. Out of the box with switching power supply, it matches what Motivo is doing. But if you add Lineo5, it pushes even further and it sounds mighty good. And with that, I hope you like this video. See you next time.